Okay, class, today we are going to read this amazing book about defying the odds and having courage and bravery through a difficult time in history. So, the book that we're going to read today is called The Steamboat School. It is by Deborah Hopkin and it's illustrated by Ron Husband. So, before we start reading this book, it's very important that we understand the time period that this takes place. So, I will read you guys the little message that they had written on the inside cover. So the story takes place in St. Louis, Missouri in 1847. When James first started school, his sister practically had to drag him there. The classroom was dark and dreary, and James knew everything outside was more exciting than anything he'd find inside. But his teacher taught him otherwise. And through hard work and learning, they did, until their school was shut down by a new law forbidding African American education in Missouri. Determined to continue teaching his students, Reverend John decided to build a new school, a floating school on the Mississippi River, just outside the boundary of the unjust law. So let's keep that in mind as we continue to read this book, that this takes place in St. Louis, Missouri in 1847 during a time period where a law was established that African Americans were not allowed to be educated in the state of Missouri. The Steamboat School. I always thought being brave was for grown-up heroes doing big, daring deeds, but Mama says that sometimes courage is just an ordinary boy like me doing a small thing, as small as picking up a pencil. The Candle School. I might as well begin with that first morning when Mama made such a fuss over me going to school. Ouch, my face isn't a washboard, I cried. She kept scrubbing. James, this is a proud day, she said. So I want us to stop and notice what's going on the page. If you notice here, we have some different text going on. I want you guys to talk with a partner and think about why there would be different size, different colored text going on within this page. And just think about that as we go along. Let's remember these different patterns that we're seeing and see if we can try to make some connections about maybe this being a title page. What if it's just black? What does that mean? If it's red, does that signify anything special? Let's just keep thinking about that as we continue to read the book. Truth was, Tassie had to drag me all the way. I wanted to stop and see everything. The steamboats dotting the river, their black smokestacks straight as pencils. The levee bustling with men loading and unloading. Sugar cane, cotton, wheat, and logs for the sawmills. River bells clanged. People shouted and scurried like ants. Hurry, urged Tassie. Reverend John doesn't hold with being late. At Third and Almond, we slipped into the church and headed down the basement steps into the darkness to the Tallow Candle School. Why can't we have windows? I whined, missing the sun already. Hush, you know why, Tassie said, and I did. So I wonder why they couldn't have windows and why they were going downstairs into a dark basement in the middle of the day. Let's think about that for a little bit. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Welcome to school, James, said Reverend John. We make our own light here. Our teacher. I followed Tassie regularly after that, though I couldn't get used to the darkness, but I liked when Reverend John read to us, or told us his own story. He was born a slave and worked in Kentucky salt pepper caves to buy his own freedom, and then earned enough money to free his mother and father too. But before he could buy liberty for his wife, her master brought her here, to St. Louis. Reverend John followed, walking hundreds of miles. I arrived with $3, he told us. But you had to pay $2 to cross the Mississippi, we chimed in. He laughed and held out his hands. All I needed was that $1 and my 2 hands to start again. Reverend John went to work as a barrel maker and a carpenter. He earned enough to free his wife. Then he became the first leader of his church. He believed in hard work and learning, and he believed in us too. So if we notice again, we're seeing these different text patterns throughout the book. Are we getting a little bit better idea of what they might be? Okay, so before I read this next page to you, the title is When the Men Came. And I want us to just take a moment and really look at this picture. And let's try to figure out what's going on just through the illustration without reading the text up there. Looking at everyone's facial expressions and how the artist decided to draw everything. I want you to talk with a partner and talk about what you think is going on here, what emotions, what event may be occurring. Awesome. It sounds like you guys are having great discussions about this. I heard a lot of people saying that they're frightened, they look scared, and we can tell from their body language this girl's hand is up. This boy looks very shocked. Even the Reverend over here, he looks very shocked as well. And then we have these guys over here. What do we think about these guys? Yeah. They look pretty angry. It looks like they're barging in through the door and they're scaring the kids. Yeah. So, when the men came. And then one day men came. They shouted. Footsteps pounded. The door flew open. Reverend John stood up to meet them. This school is closed, the sheriff said. The state of Missouri has a new law. No reading or writing for you folks, slave or free. The new law, 1847. Later I asked Reverend John to write out the law on a scrap of paper. Be it enacted by the General Assembly of the State of Missouri as follows. No person shall keep any school for the instruction of Negroes, reading or writing in this state. So now that we've seen these different types of tags, I think it is a good time to talk about them. What do we think is the point of this tag? So it's a darker red color, it's bolded, it's larger than the other text. Any ideas? Yeah, maybe a title. And then what about this red? Why do we think this whole section is in red? Yeah, because it's very important. It's a very crucial part of the story. Finding a way. That night, Tassie's tears glistened on her cheeks, as shiny as her needle in the lamp. What will happen to us now, she asked. I thought of those days Tassie had dragged me to school. Now I felt as if I had a penny that I counted on and it had fallen out of my pocket. Reverend John Barry Malcolm cares more for education than any man in this city, Mama said. He's a force like the Mississippi River itself, and like the river, he'll find a way. I didn't see how, though. I took out my scrap of paper and read the law again. We waited, but no word came. At night, I made letters and numbers by candlelight. By day, I had toted bundles of laundry for Mama and practiced reading signs. Dry goods, horses to let, stable, barber, potatoes. I closed my eyes. Horses. Horses. One morning, my steps took me to the church. I thought of our books and slates in the dark room. Funny how something you don't care about much at first can end up becoming the most important part of you. The door opened and Reverend John stepped out. Hello, James. If you're done helping your mother today, come along with me. He led the way to the levee, to a bright new steamboat. She's a real beauty, I said. Did you build her, sir? For answer, he held up his two hands. I could use some help now, though, he said. We see the steamboat. Tassie and I helped every day after that, painting, hammering, and polishing the deck. What's inside? I asked one day. Hush, said Tassie. Don't you know? And I did. So I want you guys to turn around and talk with a partner and think about what is inside the steamboat, what could be in there. Awesome, great discussion, guys. I've been hearing a lot of different answers, and you guys are using great context clues and referring back to the text. Meet at dawn. At last, the little riverboat was done. Reverend John said it was time. I felt like a pot about to bubble over. Cassie and I carried Mama's bundles of laundry like always, but this time we poked our heads into small houses and spoke softly to friends we met on the road. In 3 days' time, meet at dawn. Meet where the river bends. Be careful. Dipping the oar. The streets were dark when Cassie and I set out. We walked quickly by the levee. Suddenly, I turned a corner and bumped into a policeman. "Where are you two going?" He growled. "We're freed men, sir. Our mother's a laundress," I squeaked out. Cassie nodded. "We're fetching 2 big bundles of laundry for her." He grunted and waved us on. We ran the rest of the way. In the gray fog, the river smelled like mud. I pointed. "There, he's over there." We climbed into the skiff. "But I don't see anything," someone whispered. Then a breeze lifted the fog a little, and we saw a boat anchored in the river. "That's it," I breathed. "That's our school." So I know a lot of you guys, when I had you guys turn and talk to a partner about what we thought might be in the school, I heard a lot of people, think about what was in the boat. I heard a lot of you say that they thought it was going to be the school. Okay, so now let's take a look at this picture. This title is The Freedom School. I want you guys to do the same thing, talk with a partner, and discuss the emotions here in this picture, how everyone's feeling, what we think is going on. Awesome, yes, I'm hearing a lot of good things, that they look happy, excited, they're working together. It looks like they're back in school, writing numbers, equations, awesome. "New chairs and desk, a small library with books. I'm bringing my pole tomorrow," Tom cried. "We can catch fish for lunch." "Welcome to Freedom School," Reverend John told us, and we settled on the benches. "But sir, what about the law?" Mary asked. "James knows about the law," said Reverend John. "Can you tell them?" Does anyone remember what the law was? We discussed it earlier before we started reading. Right. The law was that African Americans were not allowed to be educated in the state of Missouri. I stood as tall as I could. "The law says that we can't be taught in the state of Missouri, but we're in the middle of the Mississippi River now. The river doesn't belong just to one state, it belongs to the whole country. The law against learning can't reach us here." Reverend John smiled, and then he laughed out loud. And we laughed too. "Now let's get to work, children," he said. "The sun's coming up." And it was. Being brave. I've written it out like Mama asked, but I don't think I'll ever forget. For I've made up my mind to go to school till I'm old enough to row the other children out and teach the little ones to read. I won't forget, because now I know that being brave can sometimes be a small thing, like lighting a candle, opening a book, or dipping an oar into the still, deep water. So after reading this book, what are some thoughts that we have? I want you to turn and discuss with a partner, and then we'll come back together as a group. So obviously in 1847, things were very different. As we can see from this book, they had a law that African Americans were not allowed to be educated in the state of Missouri. So let's just think about that for a second. How would we feel if here we weren't allowed to learn because of our skin color, if only one specific race was being singled out? Do we think that would be fair? No. And that's not right, because everyone deserves a chance to learn. And this story is just amazing. It's really great. It's an inspiring story about having bravery. Not only did our main character have bravery, and his sister and all the other children that attended the school, even though in the beginning it was illegal when they were learning down in the church basement. But it's a great story because the Reverend never stopped wanting to educate his students, and he worked through and had courage and thought of different ways to get around this law so that he was able to still educate students and give all students a chance to learn as it should be.